So I took some sheet metal parts to work to put the bends in. So we're going to have our drive shaft tunnel cover bit. These pieces will be some floor that are going to sit along here. This vertical edge should match up with the width of our center console from last video we were talking about. And I made up a little bit of battery box. This is going to take a little bit of fitting, but it should make it sure that we can put our battery really low in the chassis and up front where we're going to have the least amount of wiring weight. I just trimmed a couple of notches in the sheet metal so that this would sit a little straighter, and it'll be right over the top of our seat mounts. So the idea is, we'll go in here, I'm going to drill a few holes to cleco this in place. The back, I'm just going to where it ends up level with this angle in the back, because the idea is that'll be sheeted over later. And I'll just go ahead and get this mounted, do the same to the other side, and then we'll get our tunnel in position as well, because that's going to actually kind of tuck underneath a little bit, so there'll be a little overlap over there as well, and then we'll jump back into taking a look at what we got. So this is kind of what we're looking at, and it might look a little goofy, but like I said, these vertical edges are going to be to mount the center console kind of a thing, plus that whole vertical edge in there is going to strengthen the floor a lot. As I started like setting this up and trying to figure out where the center portion was going to go, I realized that now that I have seat mounts on here, it now becomes super easy to just put a drive shaft hoop in there for safety, because before I was trying to think of something off of the trans cross member and other stuff, and at this point it's just like, well, no, I'll just mount it right off of the I'll just mount the safety hoop right off of the seat brackets, because back here it'll be far enough back that it won't be in the way for the transmission being moved rearward to install or remove, that I could just leave a solid hoop in there, or I could always just do a brace that comes out, follows this so it stays up out of the way and across, and make something that bolts on from the bottom too. And I happen to have some 1/4 inch thick, 2 inch wide steel material that will work great for that. Probably end up just kind of like notching into the end, so I got a little more weld around this 1 inch square tube for the seat bracket, and then I'll just have to, you know, heat it up and bend it or cut a couple pieces and get it to fit however I want. And then additionally, that'll help support the floor here again too, so I can actually just continue spot welding, just like I've got everything clecoed in place, like that'll be my spot welds later sort of a thing, and go all the way up through this whole thing. And again, it'll be another cross member that ties the chassis together, as well as supporting the floor and being a safety item. Since I don't know what kind of bend radius this is gonna make, I've got, you know, just extra spacer in there to try to make it a little bit tighter. But I've come back here and you can see the mark where I put it at 5.5. I went a little beyond that. I'm at 6 at about the center of where it's going to be pushing. I've also scribed on both sides just so I have a reference later on. Now what I'm getting at is I don't know from where I mark my 5.5 and I put the bend on there. The bend is obviously going to make that tang longer than 5.5 the way I have it set up. If I bent exactly on there, it's actually going to kind of like pull in, so it'll be shorter than 5.5. That's why I added a little bit of length, because you know where we're pushing is going to be the center of the bend, and I don't know how much length that's actually going to eat up. So I'll leave it a little bit long, do the bend, hopefully be able to reference off of that to make some kind of a calculation to try to make it work out correctly on getting the bends in the right place. But this is just kind of a little bit of a trial and error way of doing it. I'm sure there's a way to calculate it if you know what the bend radius is going to end up being. I'm not even sure how well this stuff's going to you know, bend or how tight I'm going to be able to make that radius, so it's going to be just a trial and error thing. Well, we're actually just a hair over bent. Oh, I don't doubt I'll be able to try to straighten it out. At least not by hand, but we can certainly try. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we're almost 88 degrees and it's bent too far. All right, well, now I know if I bottom it out, it goes just a little bit past. But if we look, there's still a little bit of remnants there of where 5.5 was. And remember, we bent at 6. And this looks like it pulled in about 1/8 of an inch. So we were 6 from the end. Yeah, we're 1/8 inch shy of that. Yeah, we got like 6 3/16 on the outside and 5 7/8 on the inside. So some of that's a little bit of this radius down here, but I'll have to do a little math here now and figure out what's going to happen with the next bend to make sure that we can have the correct lengths on the end and the distance in the middle. Alright, I guess the math isn't that hard. So before we had 6 and we ended up with 6 1/8 for the total length. So if I measure from the top outside, we want the bend to be, we want the step to be 5 from this top face to the bottom face. So if we take 1/8 inch away and go to 4 7/8, when the bend happens, we should be at 5 outside to outside, which will make us flush with the top of the seat rail and flush with the bottom of the frame rail. Oh, that doesn't look like it's gonna work. Well, after a little more back and forth, I got it straightened out decent. We ended up at like 5 and just under 1/8. I was shooting for 5, but a little overbent on each end by about 1/8. So if I put this in just the way it is, it'll be like a little bit crowned. Well, it'll be this way because it'll be flipped over in the center. But then my bottom here will end up at the correct height, flush with the bottom of the frame, which wouldn't be the end of the world. Because I don't even know if you'd notice that little bit of crown in the floor. And it's at a point where I don't even think it's really going to matter because it's all going to be covered up anyway. So I'm kind of inclined to just go with what I got, because taking the time to try, it's really hard to straighten these things back out from being a little bit overbent. The problems I had before was it being underbent, and I was able to basically just like reverse the way I had it in the press, and then it bent the rest of the way to get to 90, so that was good. I'm having some second thoughts about this because, you know, that's kind of a really big window opening for the drive shaft should it fail. I mean, it would catch it before hitting the ground. However, with this flipped over, it's pretty close. I really should have that full height. But honestly, the drive shaft center is like 3 inches above this top plate, so like it's right there. So it'd be, yeah, so center would be right here. You know, if we got 1.5 inches, we'd only have a 1/4 inch of clearance, assuming no suspension movement, to a 3-inch drive shaft. So really I need that height. But because it being 3 inches up, really this could be just straight across. So I probably should have checked that beforehand, but you know, sometimes it helps just to have a piece to look at to, you know, get an idea. So I think I'm gonna try to bend this and crown it a little bit and flatten these out to see if I can save this piece, and then it'll just be a straight piece on the bottom to kind of box it in. And as far as any support for a floor later, I can add that out of stuff that's lighter weight, because this is a little bit of heft to it. Well, it kind of worked, but then I made this one. It ain't perfect. It's a lot better. Still need to cut it to length. I'm not going to show you how I did that one because it was sketchy and a pain in the butt. And I don't need to be responsible for somebody else getting hurt. So if you're gonna do dumb stuff, do it on your own. Don't blame me. Hey, here we are with it fit. I even salvaged some of that other piece. That'll be what gets welded into the bottom. It won't, I mean, it probably could be flat like I was talking about, but I figured what the heck, might as well salvage this piece and give just a little bit of extra clearance, just as a safety margin kind of a thing. So that'll be able to go in there. It's got a little tension in it right now, so I'll have to weld it here, or at least get it tacked before I pull it off. Finish weld the plate on, and then it'll get put back in this exact position and weld it up. I'll probably V it out just to get a little better weld on there. This does not fit tight to that piece of sheet metal, which is fine. I mean, we'll be supported out here with the sheet metal, and I'll probably put at least a couple more spot welds in here later on. And it doesn't have to fit super tight there. It would have been cool if it would, but I gotta work with what I can, or I gotta work with what I have the ability to make. This is probably the hardest part about a from scratch build, is trying to make a decision that's gonna affect a bunch of other stuff. I decided I wasn't using this stuff, and then I laid the floor back out, and now I'm like, man, it's a lot of sheet metal to make a floor out of that could just get welded in. And it's permanent floor. I don't have to worry about access panels at that point because there'll be enough extra space under here. But basically, none of the firewall is going to be usable other than the little bit of a lip to weld to. And then, you know, like basically just using a flange at that point off of it, and then I got to do some weird stuff over there. But then, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to decide about this, and this is just one of the most difficult parts of doing a build like this. Sometimes you just got to commit to something and go with it. I got weld through primer on here drying right now. I'm gonna go with my original floor plan up on the front by having a spot welded piece of steel that'll come up and put a flange up at this height, and I'll leave it that way for the passenger side. They'll be level with the floor to the back. On the driver's side, I'm gonna basically flip that over, drop it down. It's gonna be flush with the top of the frame, just to give that extra inch of like heel foot clearance for the pedals. On that side, it just a matter of trimming that bracket a little bit shorter, and then we'll have to have like a step here on the back side or whatever. And then I'm just going to fill that out. I'm going to go with my center console idea. Just after looking at a whole bunch more, that means I don't need that half circle drive shaft cover in the back if I'm going to be like boxing in everything around that anyway. So I'm just feeling like I'm gonna position the center console at a point where it kind of ends right up here at the transmission. The idea is I should have about an inch overlap on that floor flange I made. It should just clear the shifter up here, so I'll be able to put a boot over the top on top of the center console and make that work out real nice. And then once I've got that boxed in, the idea is I'll put a hinge on the back up at the top, and then all I need is 2 slits cut in the back side so that it will allow that flange on the floor to pivot past, or I just need to clearance that flange, and then I could skip the slits, and I'll just have a hinge so that it will come up and basically it'll lift up as high as touching the windshield. We'll have plenty of room to access the transmission in here. The filler plates that I'll have to do on the floor right here will just be 2 simple removable pieces. I don't think I want to attach those to the center console / rest of bell housing area, simply because of just being a lot of stuff coming up, you know, trying to lift it up. And even the bell housing area might have to end up being a second piece, which whatever, it's just going to be a couple of fasteners to hold it, kind of a thing, with a seal. But maybe I'll tie those into the floor pieces, that way it eliminates quite a bit, and then it's just the center console setting down. We'll have a flange with a seal, and should work out pretty good. Just too many ideas and trying to think it through back and forth there. I just need to like go with something to get through to the next step, kind of a deal. Alright, I got this floor pan fit. It just pops up inside of the frame on the passenger side here. I think we're going to do the same thing on the driver's side. I'm putting this all the way flush with the bottom of the frame, and I'll end up being able to build like a few mounts that stick up from this a little bit for like mounting the electronics and stuff. I think that's a good place to put it, right down there on the floor, and then we'll just make sure up in like the foot pedal area we got like a secondary tray that drops in there, just kind of collect dirt and water or anything that might get in. We'll make sure that, you know, we got a little bit of some kind of a drain in this panel too at some point, and that'd be the other reason why the a little bit of a raised mount for anything that goes in there, just to keep it high and dry, just in case of water getting in. Kind of at the point though that before I get to all that, I gotta clean off some frame and do some weld through primer and that kind of stuff first here. And I think I'm just at the point where I should try to jack the body up so we can finish the welds at the top of the cage, sand those areas and spray some weld-through primer on there, also just to make sure that they are protected, not just exposed metal on top. I'm trying not to get overdone on cleaning everything as I go here, just because I still think best case scenario is getting this blasted. But I don't know, the weld-through primer I got is Steel It. It's kind of spendy, but dang does it spray on nice. So it sprays on heavy and thick, like it's good. Like I'm thoroughly impressed so far. I'm just worried that if I was to try to do the whole thing by hand with spray cans, I'd have $1,000 into just spray paint on this, which I don't know, maybe in the long run that's still saving money over getting it blasted, but I feel like the better job is going to be blasting and like an epoxy primer on everything. But before I get to that point, I need to make sure that I've got as much stuff prepped and done as possible. And I don't see how I'm going to get to a point where we pop the body off and just the chassis goes to get blasted, primed, before putting the body back on. It just, I don't know. I feel okay with jacking it up a few inches to be able to get access. I don't know about taking it completely off, because I just don't have a good way to lift it back off and support it anymore based on, you know, tubes that went in. I mean, I guess my interior part, well, yeah, part of it there, I could put some bracing tubes back in to sections of the body, but I'm only going to be limited in how, it's not like I can take the whole thing off. I'm just limited on what I can do with it. So I'd rather just make sure the hard to get areas are taken care of, and then it could go, I mean, the outside of the body, and outside, inside, frame, everything can get blasted and primered at the same time. Is probably going to be the best case scenario. Far from graceful, but it'll get the job done. Alright, we've got the body set back on. And I've got these support angle pieces here for the floor welded in on both sides. On the passenger side we're up from the frame, and on the driver's side we're flush to give that little bit of extra foot room for the driver. Now I kind of need to figure out what I'm doing for the floor section that I want to be removable up here around the transmission, and then from there we can figure out the trans tunnel and all that. So now it's down to a little bit of thinking. I haven't put that floor pan in yet, just because it, you know, even just kind of sitting here, I've got my foot down on the floor, it just seems like it's going to make it a lot more awkward in the meantime of climbing in and out of this car. And since the body is down, you know, if this is going to be the final time, then I need to start building bracing and stuff up along the roof and the A-pillar and wherever else I'm going to support the body off of the cage, so that the body is fixed. And again, all of that's going to be climbing in and out of here a whole bunch. It'll be a lot easier if the floor isn't quite in place yet, sort of a thing. I've also been trying to plan out the seat belt mounts. I had kind of an idea of where I was going to put everything, and since a little bit of back and forth here, I think I'm going to change that slightly, just to see how it comes out a little bit different. But again, we're going to kind of just wait on that for right now. Mostly I just need to kind of keep cracking away at it a little bit and figure out what I'm doing while I'm going along. So I'm using this piece of TIG rod to try to figure out a pedal box situation on the passenger side of the car here. I know I want to put the battery right here, so I can't like just extend in on the floor, because I got to be able to remove the battery, and I want to keep the battery access to the engine bay side. Or at least I think I do right now. I could flip it around and have it come out into the footwell, but then I'd have to extend the footwell way out. But we also are trying to put our fuel lines and stuff and brake lines right here, and I'm going to need access for fittings to go to the engine right here anyway, so it's just better to put it to the engine bay side, and it'll end up having almost straight shot out the top of the car anyway, so it's not going to be an issue. I'm putting this little bit of a bend in there just for some extra room, so I should be, you know, kind of, you know, be pretty close there, where I think even with the seat, like, I'll have plenty of room for my feet. Should have enough room right here to make sure we can turn our brake line and stay on the firewall, and put like a little bit of a heel plate kind of a thing over the top afterwards. But I just want to get the sheet metal in here for right now. And I'm ending up doing this at this point because I have a template made for this removable piece. I'm just not sure how I want to have it seal up here, and that's why I'm kind of being led into this situation to start with, where if I make this pedal box area, that will get me basically all along this edge, up the cage bar, across the dash bar, and all the way over to the edge of the transmission, where I can just make a box for this that then sets in there. And I know that I only have, you know, I can come up and I can either do a bend down to let it, you know, be tight against this plate, or I can extend it just a little bit and have it bend up and then do some kind of a fastener up here, sheet metal to sheet metal kind of thing. And I'm not sure exactly which would, if one would actually be better or worse than the other, but now that I'm talking to myself through this, while I'm videoing, I'm thinking, because I'm going to have my brake line and want to be running that on the firewall here, I don't want to have a big flange up into that same area where I want to have something permanently mounted, but it could be just a short flange area there, or if I just drop it down, you know, you might be able to see the multiple pieces later on. The big thing is I just want to make sure that I have something that it seals, and maybe the best thing's going to be is just going to be make another flange piece, add it across there, so we're flat to flat instead of trying to seal an edge or a corner. And that might be just the way to go here, is just extend another flat out, get a little more floor reinforcement right there, and then the pedal box area, or the footwell area, can be its own piece. It's going to cover up a lot of that right off the bat. It'll, you know, visually it'll kind of start getting us farther along and closing a bunch of area just to help me feel like I'm getting something accomplished here. But yeah, the big thing will be I'm going to try to extend it over as much as I can this way, but now that I'm talking about that, I better make sure, because that oil filter adapter is going to have to be right here off of the block somewhere, so I might only be able to go so far, in which case maybe I just need to have, you know, right about here be the edge. This will be the footwell area. It might be a little bit narrow, but we'll make sure we got plenty of engine bay clearance there. Our fuel line fittings can come in here. They can turn 90 right up the firewall, tons of room. That might be the best bet, which then means that I still need to, you know, build firewall out this way at some point, but I'll just know that it can be flat up against this flange, so as long as I do my sealing separate from that, then it won't matter on this removable piece. So, seems like just a lot of explaining, but it's also like I needed to get through this to really come up with an idea where I'm understanding all of the different pieces that are going to go together. There's the passenger footwell area. Be able to have both feet in there kind of a thing. Be a little tight, but this is a good way to simplify it. Plan is to bring this out flush with the edge of the frame here, to weld it along that. We'll weld it to the cage coming up the side and along the bottom of the dash bar here after that gets fully welded. Probably end up just putting a flange or maybe 2 spots with Zeus fasteners for whatever we end up with for the trans tunnel kind of a thing. You know, it just needs to be fit. But I bent this entire thing by hand, and just a little bit of light hammer work. Mostly it was just lining it up on the edge of the bench over there and just pushing and getting a bend in as nice as I could. I wasn't really sure how well it was going to come out, but I'm pretty happy with how it did come out. I've got the driver and passenger floor pans roughed out now. You can see they're not completely installed yet. I still got to do a little bit of welding on them and final fitment kind of a thing, but these are going to be the two removable pieces that are going to be able to come in and out in order to give us access to working on the transmission. Those, along with the two big floor pans that I have made that are sitting on the roof here, they're going to go in on the bottom of the chassis and just give us some space underneath the seat for mounting different things. Like I talked about before, maybe we'll put the computers down there for the engine control. I've also had the idea maybe that'd be a great place for the AccuSump to go. It'd be nice, you know, tucked away, and then if it ever leaked, it's already at the bottom of the car anyway, and we're not going to have to worry about getting on a bunch of other stuff. It's probably a good stopping point for this video, just because we're kind of just trying to get some stuff done, and a lot of this sheet metal work just takes a lot of time. Like from the first clip in this video to today, it's probably been at least 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more. It's just been hard to find some time lately. I've also managed to clean the shop in the meantime, so that's been helping for a little bit more motivation as far as just being able to get out here and not feel like I've got the other Cutlass just sitting in the way, taking up space because it's blown apart everywhere. So we got a lot more of that organized, to shove the car off in the corner, and now we've got a bunch of floor space to work with again, which is helping out a lot as far as me feeling like I'm able to make some progress. Sometimes you just need that hard reset of cleaning the garage and feeling like you got a big thing accomplished and you've got the space to then continue working on stuff instead of constantly walking around and over things.